Good morning, everybody. I'm a homeless person, and you may recognize me from my TikToks. Now, I wanted to make a YouTube to address a lot of the growing curiosities that are presenting themselves on my TikTok channel. And normally, when I make videos, I'd like to focus on making something entertaining and enjoyable to watch. However, in this video, I'm trying to focus on my story. Now, my story is something that I lived, so it's not something I'm particularly excited about or passionate about. I mean, I suppose I'm passionate about who I am. Um, just to put my story all together, um, it's going to take a little bit of effort, time, and thought, and that's what I'm trying to do here. Now, I didn't write anything down. I figured I'd just make an introduction video to this YouTube channel. So I'm just going to stare right into this cell phone lens, record this video, and tell you a little bit, perhaps the basics about who I am. Now, my name, it's Gary. I think that's sufficient. And I'm a homeless person who collects aluminum cans for a living. And I've just recently started making TikToks about such things that I do. And yeah, my TikToks are doing really well, and I'm very grateful for it. So, without further ado, let's begin where I started, in my mother's womb. And that's, I guess, good as place to start as any. When I was born, I was the second of 4 kids. I was my mother's second child and my father's first. Although I did not realize that until I was like 28 years old. Now, when I was born, my mother tells me, the umbilical cord, well, I think she says the umbilical cord was wrapped around my neck. And when she was trying to push me out, I was spun the other way. Feet first. I did not want to leave that womb. I did not want to come into this world for whatever reason, and I still question to this day. However, much like my life, at the very last minute, I turn it around. And I sure hope my life goes a little bit longer than the very last minute when I turn it around. However, at the very last minute of my birth, I turned it around, and there I was. I was born into the world from my mother, and couldn't really tell you too much about it. I don't remember. I just know that story because my mother told me that story. And then, magically, my awareness comes to fruition in my childhood. And I can remember my earliest thoughts or my earliest memories of my childhood playing in my bedroom. Just like any other kid, I liked to play with toys. I loved my toys. That's what I would do. I would play with toys. Who doesn't want to play with toys when they're a kid? Now, I do have this memory. I don't know if it was a dream. I don't know if I actually did it, but it's a significant memory in my mind, and it's a strange one. However, I was a child, and I feel like I had little action figure toys, little cars, with Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse or whatever. And I remember there's being snow on the ground in the backyard, and this, I can't tell you what this is. It's in my brain. It's in my brain. It's been in my brain, for all my life. And I don't know what it is. But anyway, there's snow on the ground. And then in this memory, there's the dog shit piles that are sitting up on the snow. I'm taking my toys and just sticking them in the dog shit. And this is a memory that I have, and I have no idea where that comes from. I'm just thinking about it, talking about playing with toys as a child, so I figured I'd address that. But much of my childhood was using my imagination. I had the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the He-Mans, little Bart Simpson characters, all different types of action figures that I enjoyed, and I'd play with them. And I'd give them all little stories, and they would go on these adventures, and they would be heroes, right? And they would fight the bad guys. I loved playing like that as a kid, using imagination. And then I gotta talk about my childhood, which, you know, we all have our issues in our household growing up. And, you know, raising kids these days is much different than how we got raised in the past. And I'm 43, and how our parents got raised was even crazier, right? But when I was a kid, I was terrified of my mother. Terrified of my mother. Like throughout. And let me tell you something. She's a good woman. She's a good woman. You know, she just growing up, she had a lot of emotions, a lot of passion. And I was very quiet and timid. And how the story goes, like, and yet you gotta understand, I don't want to tell this story. I don't want to talk about my childhood because I love my mother, and she's a good woman, right? She's a good woman. We all make mistakes, and I don't think rehashing the past is the way to go. And at the same time, it's all about who I am, and I can't talk about who I am without talking about my mother, because she made me. So I'd like to address this cautiously and compassionately, because I'm not mad at her for any of it. And that's just the way that goes, right? And I do believe my mother and I were, you know, I do believe I was her punching bag growing up, in lieu of, or in regards to resentment, a core resentment that she had, that she didn't know or was emotionally intelligent to unwrap. And what that is, like I said earlier, my half sister, my older sister, right? She wasn't brought here from my father. She was brought here from another gentleman that my mother. Okay, so the story goes. Now this I learned later in life, and I put all the pieces together later in life, right? I didn't know my sister was my half sister until I was like 28 years old. And once I found that out, everything just started to click about why my childhood was the way it was. And it's because when my sister was born, and I put this together myself. Nobody even told me this. You know, you could assume that I'm assuming it. However, it just seems just like the most psychologically acceptable explanation, and of why perhaps my mother held a resentment against me as a child. Now I'm named after my father. Okay, so the story goes, my mother was 17 years old. She had her first kid at 18 years old, my older sister. So when she was 17 years old, I think, she went to the shore, and this is my mother's business. This is not my business, but I gotta tell it. She went to the shore. She went to the shore, and she she got knocked up. Maybe it was prom night or whatever, and she got knocked up by this gentleman, by this young man, and so this person, this man that knocked her up, lived in Pittsburgh, and my mother lived in New Jersey, and she was 17 years old, and she had a strict father who had 6 kids, and he wasn't having it. He was not having it. He was not letting his daughter move to Pittsburgh with some strange person that she didn't know. Now, I think to myself, I wonder what that did to my mother. I mean, I'm sure what she felt for this man, because I mean, this man, she's carrying this man's baby, and I'm sure it all happened so fast, and I'm sure it was so devastating to her, and I know she was terrified of her father. She was scared of her father. You know, her father was strict, and my physical. I love my grandfather. May he rest in peace. He's a great man. However, times were different back in those days. Back in our days, and then back in their days, times were different, and kids were raised differently. And you know, we're evolving as a society, and we're all getting better to not fuck up our kids. So what happens is she gets knocked up. Her father doesn't let her run away with this man. My father, he's local, and he's a bit of a dorky guy, right? It's pretty cool these days. He drives a motorcycle and has, he does really well. My parents are still together to this day. But my father, he was a bit of the dorky guy back then, but he was there. You know, my mother's parents knew who he was. My father's a good man. He's a hard worker. He works really hard. He's got 4 kids. You know, he's put out a whole bunch of money, especially for my 2 sisters and stuff like that growing up, because, you know, that's just, the girls, they just got more. It's just the way it goes. Anyway, so my dad's there. He's there for her, right? In my assessment, I'm thinking, okay, my mom, all this emotion, all this fear, all the things that could be going through her mind, all the feelings she could be feeling. In the end, she's settling for my father. She's settling for my father because it's the best option that she has. And then so along comes me, right? Along comes me. My mom's 19, maybe 19 or 20 when she had me. Along comes me, my dad's firstborn. My mum's, my father's mother. I call my father's mother my mum's. Apparently, I mean, I'm a kid, so this is just, I don't know how adults are thinking when I'm a kid, but apparently, because my mother told me, and my mum's, my father's mother, favored me over my older sister. She favored me. She showed me more attention, more affection, more love. And that did something to my mother. She probably already kind of resented me getting knocked up with me. And I've thought about this, and it used to bother me, but it's all good. I understand how life goes, I mean, she was young. She was a child. She got knocked up as a child, and here, I don't blame her. I'm not mad at her or anything like that. But yeah, the reason why I say she resented me is because my mother was, very, very hard on me as a child, and she cracked that whip on me. I mean, I did a lot of chores. I just had to make sure all my chores were done. I had to make sure things were all perfect, you know. It's like, you know, my mother would come home and flip out on me, and that terrified me. Like, I dreaded her coming home. I dreaded it. I dreaded it every single fucking day. I don't blame her. It's not her fault. I mean, she's matured, and she's a wonderful woman, and I love her, right? But she was working hard. She was living life. She was going through all of her shit. And, you know, nobody's perfect in life. And you know what? Everything I've been through and everything has built my character and has made me stronger. And I love my mother for it. However, when I was a child, you know, I was her punching bag. And the reason why I said, we can go further into why I'm a resentment. We'd go to family gatherings, and my mother would tell me to not give my mum-mums a hug and kiss, to not tell my mum-mums that I love her. And she was grooming me to satisfy her own insecurities and her own jealousies, you know, in regards to her perceived betrayal from her mother-in-law. And I used to be like, we would be in the car going to, you know, my uncle and aunt's house or my mom's house, and she would be like, remember what we talked about, Gary Jr., don't, you know, don't give her a hug, and don't give your mom-mums a kiss. And I'm like, Mom, she comes up to me. She comes up to me and gives me hugs and kisses. And she's like, you gotta be assertive and go, no, mom-mums, I don't want a hug and a kiss. And she was grooming me to tell my mom-mums, no, I don't want a hug and a kiss from you. When in all reality, yes, mom-mums, I do want a hug and a kiss from you. It's delightful. It's good to see you, mom-mums. And so, that fucked me up a little bit growing up. All of that shit. And I don't have to get into too much detail of how crazy my mother was. You know, there's some stories. You know, my mom did the best she could, and I think she did a really good job. But yeah, I'm a homeless person, and I do believe I'm a natural-born resentment that has done a pretty good job for themselves. That's ground score, baby.